Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
And this is the talk show dedicated to bringing the marginalized to the spotlight and uplifting the Black voices that will no longer stay silent. So let's get into this week's conversation.
Now, losing someone you love is a life-altering experience, but many people never really discuss how losing someone can continue to affect your life even after they're gone. So, Andre, I wanted to ask you, how has your family dealt with grief? Is it handled in a healthy way, like going to therapy, or is it just pushed away?
Not at all. It's fully not. It is fully not healthy at all. There was so many things. I will say, and that's honestly, I think in a lot of Black households, it's really not. It is not handled in a way that constitutes healing. What I've realized, especially when my grandmother passed away, is that my mom struggled hard with losing her because that was her mother. And what I noticed with her was that there was big decisions being made, like we moved to Augusta, from Columbia, just completely uprooted life kind of thing, because it just was like my mom wanted, I just need somewhere to go. And they tell you oftentimes too, don't make any big changes when you move, when someone dies, because you might just be doing it to kind of escape your grief and all kinds of like that. There are just so many different ways. And I've seen in certain family members, when they've lost someone, and the grief and how they processed it was not at all done in a healthy way. And this is again going back to that life insurance situation, because like had some of those life insurance policies been in place, had my grandmother had one, had somebody else had one, had these things happened, maybe it would have been something that could have been done. Going to therapy to say, all right, we're hurting right now, and we all need to be able to process this real quick. So we need to go ahead and well, not real quick, but you know what I mean. Like we need to go ahead and process this as soon as possible. So we need to go ahead and go to these therapists. But the problem is mental. We talked about this in the episodes before, but mental illness and mental health is like not really taken seriously in the industry and in life. So especially with life, what is it? Health insurance, it's not oftentimes covered. So grief counseling is one of those things, but it costs, like, who's going to spend, why would you spend $200, $300, $400 a session when you could just, deal with it yourself? And a lot of times, especially in the Black community, that's where a lot of that trauma comes from, because it lets a lot of unprocessed pain from people being lost. And I think that even to this day, people are still grieving certain things, but they are certain family members that they haven't fully understood that it is grief, because they never got a chance to take a pause and take a breather. That's what the fuck those insurance policies are for. It's for you to be able to say, I'm not coming to work for the next month or two, and you don't have to pay me because I have the money to do so. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, that's what that's for. That's genuinely what that money is for. It's for you to take that time to say, all right, because imagine losing someone so close to you and then having to go back to work the next week because you can't afford to take off any more time. Or worse, what if it's someone that what if it's your husband or your wife or whatever the case may be, and y'all paying bills together, and now you suddenly have to pay all the bills. And life doesn't stop just because somebody else's life does. You know what I mean? Right. And it's so crazy. It's so crazy because people don't really understand the gravity and the depth of how grief can not only fuck with your mind, but it can fuck with your decisions, how you move about your life, hell, how you even move about your work. And honestly and truly, people don't understand that this shit can affect every area, every corner of your life, especially if it goes unprocessed.
Oh, that is so important. And it's so important because, let's be honest, there's a lot of people that just think that an employer is going to understand grief. Like, I have worked at places where if you have like grief days, like based off of your contract that you have in your employer, from your employer, you get like 2 days, maybe a week.
Maybe.
And that is not enough time, not nearly enough time to process anything, let alone deal with the preparations that need to come with death. And so it's so important to have all of these systems in place beforehand, so you can be like, look, I am taking X, Y, and Z time off because this has happened. I need to deal with it. I'm not looking for paid days off. Like, I have what I have to survive. I just need time to process. And that's something that's so important. But, kind of going back to the question, I don't think, you know, anybody in my family goes to therapy. If they
Mm,
do, I've never heard about it, because there is that stigma of mental health in the Black community. And let's face it, mental health is expensive. So there's a difference between, you want to go to therapy, but especially if your family didn't have a life insurance policy, or, using some of that life insurance money to go to therapy, to have grief counseling. So it's one of those situations where, oppression just fucks you, to be blunt. Oppression just keeps on oppressing, where it's like, all right, you're already living paycheck to paycheck. Your
yep.
family members died. You don't
Yeah.
have time to, take off of work. You don't have
Hmm.
time or the money to see a therapist. And that's where all of that debt comes in, because, you might need to take out loans or stuff like that, and
Yeah.
really predatory processes. And so I think that it's so important, not only, to promote mental health, but also, if therapy is not an option, having a conversation with somebody about what are healthy ways to cope, having conversations to be like, hey, if this happens, like, I still want you to live your best life possible. Don't think that you need to move somewhere else to forget about me or do all of these things. Having
Yeah.
these conversations to to reassure people that things are going to be all right, and that there are healthy ways, and then starting those beforehand, starting to
Yeah.
ingrain healthy habits beforehand, can be so important to deal with death in the future, deal with grief in the future.
Exactly. I think for me, especially when my grandmother passed away, I wanted to bring this up too. She had an open casket. And seeing her, and my mom was like, we need to go see it, whatever the case may be. But I just, no. Like for me, when I saw my grandmother in that casket, it was just one of those kind of emotions where I was like, I don't ever want to experience that again. And my mom, I think she thought she was doing what was best for me to kind of help me go through whatever. But like, because it was like, you have to see this. And it's like, no, I can't. I can't do that. And the reason I say this is because, and I think there's another level of like listening to people. Listen to people and listen to them when they say what they need. And it's kind of
Mhm.
like, it was enough to know that she was dead. I didn't have to see her dead body. Do you know what I mean? And for
Yeah.
me, it's one of those things where it was because the thing that really got me together with it was like, for me, when I see a dead body, the only thing I can think about is that whoever that person was is no longer that person. Whatever they were is not them anymore. This is not them. And seeing her body in the position that it was in, I was like, this is not my grandmother. This is just the body that was left behind. The spirit, the soul, or whatever you want to call it, of whatever she was, is gone now. And so I made it very clear. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, I never want to go to the funeral again. Never. I never want to go to the funeral again. If it's open casket, absolutely. There's no whatever. I'll pay my respects, but there's no going to a funeral because of that situation. And even that, it taught me like how much I don't want to be viewed when I'm dead. It's like, no, bitch, in the fucking fire, girl, dust my ass. Like, I'm gone. Like, bitch, I'm dead. And that's why I mean, I try to make it funny, but like, truth be told, I told myself, like, bitch, I'm dead. I'm dead. That's a body. That's not me. Whoever I was is gone. And so it's just one of those things where, like I said, in that grieving, it really was one of those. Even now talking about it, it was such a hard memory to have in my mind. And I think that, like I said, as a family unit, it is just never discussed really as much because everybody's emotional and sad and stuff like that. Nobody really wants to really talk about it. And people are like, well, let's just move forward because life keeps going. But I think that there isn't enough room sometimes in the Black community to take that space to say, I'm not okay and that's all right. I
Right.
don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that especially like in my family, like I said before, my family is religious. Like, all of my uncles have some type of position in a church somewhere. Like,
Oh
it
my
is, my
God.
family runs deep in the church, and it's something that, I
Just
think
the way you
when death
said that,
happens,
all of them something. They something in the church. They
they
something.
something, deacons, preachers, pastors, you know, all of it. And I think
Yeah.
that, it's one of those situations that when death happens, so many times people just go to prayer. They go to prayer. They're like, this is a hard time. We're going to pray for you, all of this different
Yeah.
things. And, that's also why funerals are important for them, because, you have the funerals in the church, you have your church service, you have all different types of sermons. Like, the only funeral I remember going to, there was just like 2 or 3 different sermons. And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now.
Exactly.
Because it was not explained to me. And so I think that having conversations to be like, hey, yes, religion is important to people, respect that, but also what are other things? Because if you are somebody that believes that, God will answer your prayers, I also need to tell you, if you read the Bible, you can't just pray and expect it to be solved. Like,
Yeah,
you
God's
still
not a
have
genie.
to put in that work. Like, if you believe that God will bring a blessing into your life, that blessing could be healing hands. That blessing could be somebody else's voice to help you go through something. That blessing could be all the people that are brought into your life. So you can't just pray and expect, like, all right, he touches me and now I'm good. Like,
now I'm done. Yeah, it's over now. I'm healed.
Yeah, he may be answering your prayer by bringing somebody else into your life, or giving you that courage, that power, that privilege and opportunity to seek out help.
That's what people don't understand about God, is that, like, God isn't a genie. Like, he's not just blink and it's just magically you're okay. Like, no, if you really do believe in God and you really, like, understand him, you understand that God has created scientists and doctors and lawyers and people like that. He created those people with those kind of passions for a reason. There's a reason why people say, God, why can't I just move past this grief? Well, bitch, I got 415 billion grief counselors that I created for you. That's what the fuck their job is doing. I got that. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think you would say with all them experts.
I mean, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I'm pretty sure he's like, listen, I created these people for a reason. These people, if you really believe in God and you believe in Christianity, you believe in whatever, God is perfect. And so that means that he's created people in this life for a perfect reason. And sometimes that reason is to make people to help heal you. And it's like, I can't go driving and be like, God, take the wheel, and then I'm not going to die. Like, that's not how that works. God created the person who made the car, and the car has safety features that make sure that I'm able to stay on the road and do stuff like that. So there are different levels to it. And I think people oftentimes get trapped up in that idea that therapy or that praying is enough. That praying is enough. And I think that, yes, praying can be an assist. It can be definitely a great assist. It could definitely be a great comfort. And yes, God can, if you believe in God and that's your whole thing, God can bring you comfort. But unfortunately, there is still a level of community that goes into that. And so while God may always, if you believe in God, again, I'm not over here, preaching nothing like that. But if you believe in God and you're, whatever, because I'm not Christian, but if you believe in God and you believe in that connection or whatever the case may be, then you understand that God controls and is able to heal your spirit. But he's not, and though he can heal your mind or your body, he doesn't always do that, because that's what other people's jobs are for. And so your spirit will be fine, but your mind is still grieving. Your heart is still grieving. God may be able to feel your spirit, but your heart and mind still need healing. And that comes from seeking out the people necessary. And even if it's not a therapist, but being able to say, hey, Daquon, I want to talk to you about my blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, whoever your family, or somebody in your family or friends being like, hey, listen, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, and I need someone to talk to. And that helps heal your mind. It helps heal your heart. And God got your spirit. You know what I'm saying? If that's how you want to work with that. So I think it's very much so like a give and take, a kind of, mixing of it. It's kind of a connection of all those things that kind of help you get through it. But I don't think there is a lot of space given for people to say, Mom, God is not, praying is not just, it's not enough.
Right. And I also want to think about, specifically in the Black community, like, we have to talk about Black death because it is so normalized in our society. So, Andre, do you think that the frequency and publicity of Black death in the media affects how we grieve our own communities?
I think so. I think unequivocally, because I don't know about you, Daquon, and let me get emotional, but like, sometimes, and I feel so bad having to do this, but sometimes when I see those TikToks or Instagram posts, or they're like, X, Y, and Z has died because of blink, 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 I just like, I can't. Like, I just skip over it, or I move it, or I just like, I just keep going, because I'm like, we know it's a problem, and of course, my heart goes out to people who have been lost. Of course it does. But it's just like when you hear it all of the time, every day it feels, it's like enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, enough. I can only take but so much. My heart can only take but so much, because I know that there's nothing that I can do that will heal that person. The person's dead. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where it's like, it makes you feel so powerless, because, and of course, that's the reason why me and Daquon do the show, is to try to bring we try to bring Black issues to the forefront and try to process the stuff that we've gone through, because the reality is, we know that it's not going to be solved in one episode. We know that's not going to be solved in 1 year, one decade. This is going to take time, so much time. And so when you see Black death in the media populating so much, it just drains you. And I guess, and actually, now that I think about it, maybe that's a reason why so many Black households don't discuss death, because it's everywhere, especially if you're in a neighborhood that's very violent.
Right. I think that's so important. I think that, thinking about my neighborhood, I knew a lot of people, who unfortunately died at a young age because of some type of violence.
Yeah.
And it's one of those conversations where death happens so often that it's just like, do I have the space? Do I have the capacity to just like deal with this, to listen to it? Because like there are a lot of times when, something, happens on my timeline and on social media, I just scroll and see Black death after Black death after Black death. And I think that it is important that we, have a space to talk about these issues that cause so much Black death.
Of course.
But at the same time, there are different ways to do it. There are different ways to just like put out trigger warnings, put out all of these different things to have these conversations. And also just like respecting the person. Like, I think so many times we honor people in death more than we honor them in life.
Exactly.
We talk about people more in death than we do in their life. So it's almost like their life becomes something when they die.
Exactly.
And that's sad to think about, that possibly my life purpose is to die. And it's one of these conversations that I think that it just numbs you, because you see death so many different times and you kind of get this pessimistic view. Like, I have gone through some really dark times thinking about death in different ways, because I'm just like, like, I'm an artist. So a lot of times as an artist, you're just like, oh, people are only going to like really fuck with your work after you're dead. Ooh. And you kind of think about, if I'm doing all of this in my life, am I doing this to have a legacy for after I'm dead? Or am I doing something for me right now? Am I living for myself in the present, or am I living for my death and hopeful legacy after death?
Daquon, that's a whole nother episode right there. Daquon, that's a whole
right. And we can get there, but I think that,
but I feel you though. I feel you.
It was especially brought up because recently I found out about Bell Hooks passing away. And Bell Hooks is an amazing Black feminist, Black womanist, activist, advocate, just all of that. And there were so many people that I personally know, that I've tried to talk about Bell Hooks with, who did not know who Bell Hooks was. And then all of a sudden they're like flooding their timeline, and I'm with Bell Hooks and I'm like, you are celebrating a person who's dead, but you
didn't
never
care about
knew
when they were alive.
And I think that we just kind of, and I think that's also kind of going back to the question about the publicity and frequency.
Yeah.
We've gotten to a point to where Black death is so numbing that like, that's the only time we can, honor Black people.